Hello, my name's Craig Bothwell. I'm an agricultural consultant at SAC Bush, and I'm joined here today by Kate and Ed Rowell, both previous monitor farms from Quality Meat Scotland, and Kate's chair of QMS at Current. At this point, I'd just like to welcome Poppy Frater. Poppy Frater's our grassland and sheep specialist, so Poppy's based down in St Boswell's and working with SAC Consulting.
So could you talk us through the initial trial that you did as part of the Monitor Farm project to reduce your ewe feeding costs?
Yeah, so before the Monitor Farm, we had been feeding the sheep in the shed before lambing with barley twice a day and hay, usually, sometimes haylage. It was quite a lot of work, there was quite a lot of labour involved, and as part of the Monitor Farm project, John suggested that we try feeding them with really good quality silage and soya, either high pro soya or protected soya. So we did a couple of years where we did trials. We did one with the soya and the high pro soya every day, and the next year we did one where we fed high pro soya to one group every day and to the other group every other day, and both those trials resulted in results that meant that we could do either. There was no difference between feeding the ordinary soya or the protected, and there was no difference between feeding them every day or every other day. So the whole sort of outcome of that was that we moved our entire feeding strategy. So from 3 weeks before they were due to lamb, they were fed pretty much ad lib high quality silage. It's probably in the troughs in front of them for about 22 hours out of the 24. And just on top of that, every day we put on some protected soya at 50 grams per lamb. As I say, it did work doing it every other day, but what we found from a management point of view was it was much easier just to do it every day, and you got a really good look at them because every you got into the trough and you picked up very quickly if there was any issues. So that saved money, it saved time, it saved labour, and it was, well, my dad said at the time, I remember him saying to John, this is one of the best things that you have ever come up with. It's a brilliant idea.
Fantastic. But of course, I guess it goes alongside making the good quality silage and monitoring how the ewes are doing, and also I guess with the Monitor Farm you've monitored a lot of data to make sure it doesn't have a detrimental effect on lamb performance and
yes, and I mean, coming from a vet background, I'm quite sciencey, and I do like all the figures, and I like to prove to myself that something works, or prove to other people that it works. So don't just do something without measuring it to make sure the outcome you're getting. And yeah, it has been a really good, just a really good thing to do. Like Dad said, one of the best things that we have done.
So since then, you've been investigating using a product called Neolap, which is based on rapeseed meal. Could you talk us through why you've decided to investigate this product? Yeah,
well, it was a great trial at the time doing the soya, but since then soya's not become much less popular from an environmental point of view and a sustainability point of view. Obviously everybody knows about the rainforests and everything, so we have been thinking about, is there something else we could use? And Ed saw an advert in a magazine for Neolap. We hadn't heard about it before, but when we read that it sounded really interesting, and I just thought it would be a really good experiment to try that alongside the soya and see if there was any differences between the two. So we got some Neolap this year, and we did it was a real proper trial actually. We followed John's protocol from the first time. We weighed all the ewes before they went in the shed. We separated them into two groups based on their weight. So the heaviest went into group one, and the next heaviest went into group two, and then the next heaviest went into group one. So it was all randomised. At that point, I also recorded all their condition scores, so we knew where they were at when they went into the shed. Then once they went in, they were fed the two separate diets. So one group were fed the Neolap at 100 grams per lamb, and the other group were fed protected soya at 50 grams per lamb, and they were fed that right through the whole 4 weeks before they started lambing, and then right the way through lambing as well. And it was really interesting to see things like palatability. When we first opened the Neolap, we thought, oh goodness, what is this? It looked like you said it looked like
gravel,
really. It didn't look appetising, and the first time I put it in the troughs, the ewes were a bit sort of, what's that? But the second day they ate it all up, and it was absolutely fine, so there was no problem with palatability. And we took lots of different data recordings. I condition scored them after they lambed. We weighed the lambs, and then we weighed the lambs again at about 8 or 9 weeks afterwards, just to make sure that there was no differences. So we got a huge amount of data out of it, and really the outcome was that the Neolap did just as good a job, and it's got all the benefits of sustainability, being produced locally, part of a circular economy. So I think that's the way we'll be heading in future.
So the new Neolap product, which is based on rapeseed meal, has been formulated to have quite a high DUP content and a high protein content. The DUP content is equivalent to soya. It is less than protected soya. So protected soya is being treated in a way so more of the protein bypasses the rumen. The protein content is around 30% on a dry matter basis, so it's still pretty high, but not as high as the protein content of soya, which is around 45%. And then the energy content of this Neolap product is around 15.5 ME, which is higher than soya again. So it's quite a good targeted source of nutrition in late pregnancy. So feeding in late pregnancy, or otherwise known as the golden 35 days, is really influential to lamb survival and colostrum development. At this stage, the energy and the protein demand of the ewes starts to rise rapidly. So in terms of protein, there is protein formed by the rumen bugs, and there's also protein that is provided to the animal, but it bypasses the rumen and is absorbed in the small intestine. So this protein that bypasses the rumen is otherwise known as digestible undegradable protein, or DUP. So of course, before feeding these sort of targeted protein products, could you just comment on what sort of tick boxes you need to check to make sure that there isn't any detrimental effect on the ewes?
Yeah, so one of the most important things was to have the high quality silage. I mean, we couldn't have done any of the trials either now or at the original Monitor Farm programme without really high quality silage. So that's the one thing that we need to have. So we need to make sure, and it's quite difficult because you're making silage and you don't know how good it's been until 6 weeks later when you get it tested, but you have to just hope that you've done all the right things and got the good quality silage. For example, last year the first cuts weren't brilliant at all, but we did make some second cut, which we knew on the day, really, we knew when we made it that it would be the stuff that we would use, and we were right with that. The other thing needs to be that all the sheep need to be able to get in at the same time. They are quite good at bullying each other, and you get big strong sheep that bully the younger ones, the gimmers, the smaller ones out of the way if they can't all get in at the same time. So to make sure that they all get the right amount of the protein, they all need to be able to get their heads in the trough and eat it at the same time.
So you're talking about targeting the feeding based on really high quality silage and then just supplementing with good quality protein. So I guess when you're making high quality silage, you're saying it needs to be a minimum of 11 ME for this to work.
Yeah.
But on top of that, what are you doing to make sure they eat enough of that, get enough energy from that?
Well, basically it's a matter of making sure that the headspace on the troughs, which is basically enough, where we've got 33 or 32 sheep in each side of the trough, and they've all got enough room to get in, sort of thing, because we blow the silage up with a straw chopper up the troughs and carry it out the last little bit to make sure that everything's got enough. And we've kind of fill that up on a morning so they've got enough to last them the whole day and through the night, sort of thing.
And we've found in the past we have sometimes occasionally made third cut silage, and often that can be too wet and it can be quite acidic, and that's not good, because if it's acidic they don't like the taste of it, so they don't eat enough. Also, it's not good from a labour point of view because the stuff's heavier and it's more difficult to move. So first or second cut is definitely best. It needs to be palatable and it needs to have a reasonable dry matter. If it's too wet, it just doesn't seem to work as well.
So you mentioned that you chop the silage. So can you talk us through that, please?
Well, yeah, when we make the silage, the baler chops it up so it's a smaller section so the sheep don't waste as much when they pull it out the troughs. Plus it's easy to use with a straw chopper to blow it up the troughs when it's chopped.
And it's easier to move as the labour force. It's easier to get armfuls of it and pull it out and move it up the troughs as well.
So what I really like about this ration, it's a high fibre diet and very minimal in starches. So as soon as we start to add sort of starchy feeds to the ration, things like crushed barley, you reduce the pH in the rumen, and it makes the rumen less effective at extracting the protein it requires. So having a nice silage, good quality silage-based ration and targeting that protein, and specifically with that DUP, more of it is being converted into protein the animal can utilise for colostrum production, for the fetuses and for milk at the end of the day.
And the other thing that we found, and John did say this at the time, was that it was almost a more natural diet, and that the sheep could respond to that, and they actually did. They lamb much more naturally because they're grazing almost at pretty much ad lib silage. They didn't lamb in the dead of night as much. Their lambing pattern went back much more to a more natural state, so there wasn't quite as much work during lambing time in the actual dead of night, and it was more about twilight and dawn when they did most of the work.
So could you comment on how your main lambing issues might have changed from the sort of soprolin soya diet to what it is now? How are things like prolapses and colostrum supplementation, how's that changed?
So yeah, one of the things that we were worried about that some people had flagged up was if you're giving them more silage, would they have more prolapses? And we found that was absolutely not the case. I mean, we didn't have a huge number of prolapses before, but we always had 10 or a dozen. And since we started this way of feeding them, we hardly get any. Last year I had one out of 400 sheep. So the prolapse thing, it's definitely been good to do it this way. I haven't found any problems with either the amount or the quality of the colostrum that the ewes produce. That's been fantastic. They seem to milk really well. We used to have issues with lameness. Now I have no idea whether that has got anything to do with the diet, but we very rarely have lameness issues now, and that could be because one of the things we did find is that as long as you use a dry enough silage, we don't need to bed them quite as often, whether that's diet related or not. But there really haven't been any health issues that have come up from this. We, like everybody, we get an odd case of twin lamb disease before lambing time. That hasn't significantly altered since we changed the feeding regime. We're not getting any more of them, and overall I'm just really pleased with the health of the sheep through the whole process. The fact that we do need to monitor what their body condition score is and things is also quite a good thing. It's pushed us into doing that, and it means that we probably intervene a bit quicker with anything that is starting to get a bit leaner. And they get a little bit extra. You can give them a bit extra sugar beet to get them some more energy if that's what they need.
So could you comment on the behaviour of the ewes as you switched from this silage-based to the silage-based diet rather?
Yeah, I think they do behave a bit more naturally. They don't have, because the food's in front of them all the time, they don't have that same competition to push each other out the way. I mean, we all know what cross ewes can be like when you go into a field with a bag. They just about knock you over, and because they've got the high quality silage in front of them all the time, you see them getting up and down and going eating and then going lying down again, and it's not that same sort of rugby scrum to get in. They do all come running in when you put the soya or the Neolap on top, but it's only for a really short space of time. And apart from that, they seem to be behaving quite naturally. And what's been interesting this year, actually, is we got cameras put up before lambing time this year for the first time. And it really has been quite interesting watching them from the living room and watching their behaviour. You see them getting up and down and sort of pushing each other. You know, I want to lie there, you move out the way, and then it'll lie down. The other one will get up and go and have a bite, and then it'll go and lie down. And it does appear as if they're quite calm and they're quite natural, like they are when they're out in the field and you see them in the summertime.
So you get your silage analysed. Could you comment on the value of that and how you might react to different silage analysis if it was lower or in energy or protein than you hoped?
Yeah, so we look for the cut that's had the highest ME. Obviously, that's the one we're really looking at. But then it's also really important to look at the amount of protein that's in that sample as well, so that both those figures are right. And we take advice on rations from consultants and things to make sure that we're using the right one for the right class of stock. And as we said previously, if there's any that aren't very high in ME, that aren't very high in protein, we've got the suckler cows outside, and we can sort of adjust their ration quite easily with straw and things to use that up. But obviously it's great if we've got a choice of different stacks of bales that have all got really good results, and then we can target them properly at the right classes of stock.
Sheep have the best silage.
My sheep in the shed before lambing time get the best.
So it should be. So you've mentioned, you have options when it comes to silage. You're obviously quite precise in terms of making sure you get an analysis of each cut and each field, which is good to make sure that you can prioritise the sheep accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. We take different cuts, obviously, and different fields, and we try to get a sample from every single one. And it is amazing how much they vary in quality, how much the ME varies, how much the protein varies, how much the weight of the bales varies. So all those things are really important, and that was something that we very much took from the original Monitor Farm programme. And it is, beforehand we would maybe guess at which heap came, how many bales came from each field and all that sort of thing. But now it's all written down on the day we do it, how many bales there are, so that we can make a sort of ration plan quite early on in the year, so we know what we're doing through the winter.
So Kate and Ed mentioned that they use soprolin, the protected form of soya. With more of the protein being protected, it means less of it is used and broken down in the rumen. And I would only advise that this protected form of soya is used when the protein in the silage is adequate. So if there's less than 12% crude protein in the silage, I would recommend using straight soya, so you get some of that rumen degradable protein as alongside the DUP. So in terms of the Neolap and the soprolin trial, what's your key take home?
So of all the things we measured, there really wasn't much difference between the two feeding strategies. They use lost body condition, obviously, as they always do before lambing, but it was the same for both feeds. They all had plenty of colostrum. The lamb weights were pretty similar. I measured them all at birth, and the lamb weights were pretty similar between the two. There wasn't anything significant difference in there. The lambs were then weighed again 8 or 9 weeks after, and there wasn't a huge difference in the lamb growth rates between the two. So really, it's given me the confidence to go on and use the Neolap in the future. It's probably about, or last year anyway, it was about the same price as normal soya. So the cost isn't that different. It is a bit more expensive than using the protected soya because you have to use more of it. But I think that's, in my head anyway, that's weighed against the fact that the Neolap is local, it's produced in Scotland, it's far more sustainable, and you have got that whole sort of global issue of bringing soya out of rainforests, and the whole climate change debate has got to be taken into account. So I mean, we're quite happy to pay that little bit extra to get a local product, and it also gives you a bit more resilience because you have got an option. I mean, I wouldn't rule out using soya again if we had to in the future, but for us for next year, I think the plan is to use a Neolap if we can make good enough quality silage this year and start the whole process again.